Hey guys, good evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you are. Welcome back to Sunday dinner. I just got done with my evening run with my girlfriend. We went down on the the trail there, whatever that's called, in Northwest Bradenton. So I am eating because I'm starving. That's what happens after you run. But yeah, welcome back. We get the blue light back there. That kind of goes with the Foot in the Grave cover. But we're really doing it today because of the Captain America comic. And as you know, America has three colors: red, white, and blue. Couldn't really get a good white light. Red was a little too menacing, so we went with a soft blue in the background. So there you go. Anyway, I'm eating a hoagie roll sandwich with non-bread crisps and raspberries, because you got to get that fiber. You got to get those antioxidants and such. It's been quite the week. I went to see A Complete Unknown, which is the Bob Dylan musical biography starring Timothy Chalamet as Bob Dylan. I thought it was pretty good. I haven't read any reviews, heard any opinions. That's just my opinion. It's hard to it's hard to critique something like that when it's based on true events. It's a person's life, right? You can't really criticize how it plays out, or necessarily like whether certain things become relevant soon enough, because it's just what actually happened, allegedly, right? Maybe they fudged a little bit, but I thought it was pretty good. I thought Timothy Chalamet, his voice is a little goofy, but it sounds like Bob Dylan. All the songs were good. It covered some good bases. I was wondering when they were going to end it, because Bob Dylan, he's still alive today. I actually went to see him a couple years back in like 2018, 2017. Wasn't great. You don't go to listen to a great voice. You go because it's Bob Dylan. But yeah, he's obviously old. Doesn't sound like he used to, and even back then he sounded pretty silly. So I was wondering when they were going to end. I was wondering if they were going to touch on the Wilburys era, but they did not. They stopped it after he went electric. The concert where he pulled out the electric guitars. I forget what the name of that venue was, but it's a pretty significant moment. Made sense to end it after that. Very, very Bob Dylan to piss off an audience of people like that. But yeah, I liked it. I thought it had plenty of heart, plenty of love, and plenty of scrutiny for the character. Bob Dylan, he's a flawed man, but he represents the rebellious spirit. I think he was pulled into a movement he really didn't care for in terms of civil rights and all that. I think everyone wanted to make him this poster boy of like folk and new age Americanism. They put him as the final act in every show. Even that big Help the Hungry concert, he was still the final show, and he always looks like he's like, yeah, I guess I'm up here singing. He never really had his heart all that into it, I don't think. I think Bob Dylan really just wants to make music. He always has. So I think the movie captured that pretty well, how he kind of fell out of love with all the politics of it and the social causes, and that really is why his relationship didn't work out with Joan Baez, because she was that figure, that leftist sort of social cause person, and Bob kind of wasn't. Movie touched all the right bases. If you like Bob Dylan, you'll like the movie. If you've never heard Bob Dylan, if you've never gone out of your way to listen to him, first of all, I would recommend you do. One of my favorite songs by him is Silvio, which is a little later in his discography. Let me see. Silvio. Bob Dylan. Yeah, written by Bob Dylan and Robert Hunter in 1988. It's performed with the Grateful Dead. So if you're a Grateful Dead fan, if there's, many of those still kicking around, that's a good song. Silvio. Grateful Dead kind of helped try to reinvigorate Bob Dylan's career. He was struggling in that time. That's right around when the Wilburys were a thing, the Traveling Wilburys. So, like, Tom Petty was another figure in his life who, wrote a song for him, tried to re-inspire him, get him back on his feet. And now he's still performing to this day. I'm also a music guy, so if you're not a music guy, you may not enjoy the movie as much. But I'm big on the classic rock stuff. That's part of what inspired me for writing the Continuum series. Three Rivers Plague and Foot in the Grave, they're, if you don't know, it's about a rock band in the 80s that gets tangled up in the zombie apocalypse. And Thomas Wilde is our main character. He's the lead singer, head of the band. And we took inspiration from quite a few people for Thomas. He's got a little bit of Kurt Cobain in him. The whole band has a little bit of Led Zeppelin. A few country artists that we took inspiration from because we went to a bunch of shows, back in the year when we started writing it. So he's got a little bit of Dierks Bentley, a little bit of inspiration from, what's his name? Kenny Chesney. We went to a Kenny Chesney show where a disaster struck. And there was like really bad rain, lightning storm, and everybody had to get rushed out. So they had to stop Kenny while he was singing. And I remember Kenny was like, all right, it's not safe. Everybody go, we'll be back. He promised we're going to be back. But everybody stay safe. They're telling me you have to go make sure you stay safe. And that kind of inspired our scene at the start of Three Rivers Plague, where Thomas works with the crowd a little bit, trying to make sure everybody's okay, trying to keep the chaos reined in. So yeah, we're music guys, clearly. Complete unknown. Bob Dylan biopic. I do recommend it. Now onto the books. In terms of reading this week, I actually went out of my way to pick up a comic book. I don't read that many comics anymore. I used to be big on them. I used to read all the Walking Dead comics, Punisher, Max. I was big on Batman comics, like The Killing Joke and all that. Kind of collected them, kept them around. But I haven't been reading them all that much lately. But I got into kind of an inspiration of it when I was talking about Bucky Barnes. Bucky Barnes is the Winter Soldier. He's Captain America's sidekick from the comics and his good friend in the movies. And in the comics, after Captain America, quote-unquote, dies, Bucky Barnes takes up the mantle. And this was back in 2007, so kind of post MCU or post Marvel Comics Civil War, a little bit political, really getting into the economic crisis at the time, but not political in terms of what you see a lot of today. There wasn't a whole lot of shoehorning, ham-fisting, social politics. It was more the country's kind of turned upside down. There's a lot of unrest. There's a lot of uncertainty. People aren't feeling good. The banks and the corporations are kind of taking advantage of us a little bit. And the comics play with that, and they have Red Skull and the Russians be behind it, which is a pretty funny take, that they're influencing the stock market to crash. But I read the first comic in that series, where Bucky Barnes takes the mantle, and that is Captain America number 34 from the 2004 run. And real blast from the past, that one, because they bring up all the economic crises and all that. But there's also a reference to Lost in that comic issue. On the news screen in the helicarrier, it says like Jack Shephard, the Lost found, teasing it. Must have been like season 4 or something. That was pretty funny to see. Real period piece, that one. But the comic itself is pretty short. It's just a single issue. It shows Bucky putting on his new uniform, which I really like. It's got the flag like triangle going down, and then it's got the black waistline, black combat pants. It's a darker outfit, darker version of Captain America, but it's still got the wings and it's still got the colors up top. And he says, he never would have worn Steve's uniform. He doesn't believe he has the right. He doesn't believe anyone has the right. But he says, because of his arm, his metal arm, because he's already been the Winter Soldier by this point, that he's really one of the only people that can properly use Steve's shield. And he proves that throughout the comic. They fight a bunch of AIM people who are trying to rob Fort Knox. Very, very comic book stuff. He teams up with Black Widow, and at one point he throws his shield, and it looks like he missed. So then he the AIM guy's like, oh, that's not Captain America, and then he just shoots him. The panel is literally like, bah, 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 bah. Like, I'll do it my own way. Very Bucky, very Winter Soldier, I should say. One of the coolest iterations of the character, I think. I essentially discovered this character back in the Superhero Squad days. There was this online game called Hero Up, which was Superhero Squad online, and it was all these Marvel characters in kind of this E for everyone, like cartoon style. One of the characters you could buy with in-game currency that you could earn by playing, it's like silver or something, was Bucky Barnes' Captain America. Because he was still running as Bucky in the comics during this time. Those comics were still coming out. This was back in like 2010. And so they were like, yeah, well, people are going to want the Steve version, so we'll just make the Bucky version cheap and easy to get. But I loved it. I was like, wow, this is the coolest thing ever. Captain America with a gun. That's awesome. And so then I just went from there, and I learned more and more about the character. And it's really fitting for Bucky. It's an interesting story arc. Would have been really interesting to see in the movies how this guy who is essentially turned into in the movies he worked for Hydra, right? Evil German. But in the comics he was a Soviet, which during the Cold War, even during the 2000s, like that was almost worse. It was like, oh, he was a Russian. Like, oh no, evil. But to see the arc of that character becoming Captain America, it's like, can he really redeem himself? Can he become the symbol of hope and freedom after essentially being a communist, whatever? And, the movies, Steve seems to hold the opinion that he can redeem himself. Steve moves the heavens to try and help Bucky redeem himself, to stand up for him. And it really seemed fitting. It really seemed like the MCU could have done that. They had to go that direction. And it really feels like that's the decision Steve would have made in that moment when he's passing on the shield. I feel like he would have given it to Bucky. But they had him give it to Falcon, which is a more recent iteration of the character, the Falcon Captain America. I don't really like it. I don't like Captain America with wings. With actual wings. I like the wings on his head. I don't like them on his back. I think it's too much. Like, especially in the movies. Like, they pulled off Iron Man with CGI and stuff, but like, that's who Iron Man is. I watched the trailer for Captain America 4, and it's like CGI. It starts off as this political action thriller. like it's going to be another Winter Soldier movie. And then it just slowly becomes this CGI model throwing a CGI shield at CGI missiles. And then there's the Red Hulk stuff, which in, 10 years ago, they probably wouldn't even have put that in the trailer. They would have known this movie was going to get viewers, make money. It's a Captain America movie. And then they'd surprise you with the Red Hulk. But now they're so desperate. Superhero movies aren't doing as well. Marvel's not doing as well. And so they have to kind of put everything up front. So they reveal this third act, Harrison Ford turning into the Red Hulk in the trailer. And it really didn't do any services for me. They make like a funnily enough, MCU remark, is what they call it now. And one of the people makes that after Harrison Ford transforms, where they're like, they make him red now? And it's like, come on, man. That's not funny. Those jokes haven't been funny for 10 years. It's not sincere. You're not taking it so seriously. You're making fun of the comics, essentially. It doesn't work for me. And it just looked like a CGI mess. There's a shot where Falcon / Captain America lands and does like a superhero landing, and he's got the wings jutting out behind him, and it just looks bad. It's not a good shot. I really can't get behind it. And the Thunderbolts trailer I saw as well, and it also seemed kind of weird. I was in a theater for Bob Dylan, right? So I was with like 60s, 70s, 80s year old people, and they have no idea what the hell's going on. That's, in my mind, that's a good screening of the general audience. It's like, do these old folks know what they're looking at? And it goes through all the characters in Thunderbolts, and it's like Russian Captain America, John Walker Captain America, Yelena Belova Black Widow. It's like, these people don't know what the hell they're looking at. They have no idea who these characters are. It's like, what is this? This is like a failed Suicide Squad, Guardians of the Galaxy imitation. Nobody knows what the hell this is. It's weird to see 3 frickin' derivatives of Captain America in one movie. It's weird. People don't... They're like, I don't know these characters. And the only recognizable character that I think most of the general audience would know is Bucky. And the only good shot, in my opinion, from that trailer was the scene where Bucky, puts his metal arm up to protect the 2 other people and kind of bounces the car. Bounces the big-ass truck. And that was a cool shot. But that made me miss Bucky Captain America. Because imagine how cool that shot would have been if he was holding the shield and he was protecting civilians dressed up in, the spangled outfit. Could have been cool as hell. But we had to give up on that because Marvel wants to do all new, all different. They want to jump right into that for the movies. Obviously because they want more diversity. But, those comics got plenty of problems. There's so much to do from before that era. And they just skip past it. It's a shame. It's a shame. I think Bucky Barnes as Captain America is probably my favorite passing of the torch legacy character out there. Competing with Wally West. Just because it feels so right, and it was such a cool little era, however short it was. It's a good arc for Bucky. So it's a shame it didn't happen, but there's nothing you can do about that now. They couldn't suddenly trade places now because then that would mean taking it from Falcon, and there's no way the MCU would strip Sam Wilson of the mantle now. That's never going to happen. So you just have to work with what they got, and I think what they got is not great. But maybe Fantastic Four will be good. Anyway, if you agree with me at all, and you think that Bucky deserves the mantle, check out those comics. It's a Captain America run from 2004 to, 2011, 2012, something like that. But number 34 is the first issue where he dons the outfit. And it's granted to him by Tony Stark, who becomes the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. and essentially tells him, Steve left a note saying he wanted to pass this on to you. I can't officially be seen next to you because you're not registered because of the Superhero Registration Act with Marvel Civil War and all that. And so there's some nuance to it, some political nuance, which there used to be in comics, which was fun. Anyway, real quick, I wanted to go over my first impressions of the semi-finalists for Sphinx, which is the speculative fiction indie novella competition. We got through the first round last year, technically, but the last few months, and now we're on to the semi-finalists. So I got a few more sent my way, 5 to be exact. My team is going to read them, but also me and Josh are going to read through them as well. The first one we got here is Blackburn Station by Karen H. Lucia, one of the two. I hope I'm not pronouncing it wrong. But it looks to be a science fiction novella. I'll read the blurb for you right here. Jane watched the destruction of her home. Her friends and family, gone. The community of Blackburn Station wiped from the galaxy. Trapped in the confines of her escape pod, she forced herself to take in the totality of the space station's destruction time and again. Blackburn Station had always operated outside of Union control. After the attack on the station, nobody but scavengers looking for a payout came to pick up the pieces. Returning to Blackburn is the last thing Jane should want to do, but is all she can think about. Ooh. So it sounds to me a little bit alien inspired, maybe. I don't know that for a fact. But going back to a ruined space station, outside of Union control leads me to believe that there is a little bit of an overpowering force in this universe. And the scavenging side of it seems to be these people are kind of picking up little pieces outside of that overpowering force. That'll be an interesting little read. Yeah, that's at 4.69 on Goodreads with 13 ratings and 5 reviews. So good signs there. I'm interested. The next one is Magic in the Mud Show, a historical fantasy novella by Nick Weissman, one of the two. Once again, I apologize if I mispronounced it. I'm not trying to offend anybody. I finally took a bite of my sandwich. I didn't want to do that in the middle of talking because it's kind of like crummy and big. Anyway, a famous circus, a sick elephant, a dead artist encased in wax. What does it all mean? Neva, a bone-bending dancer, isn't sure, but she needs to find out before she ends up in wax herself. Magic in the Mud Show is a historical fantasy set in the Barnum and Bailey Circus of 1892. The story serves as a prequel to Witch in the White City. A lot of prequel novellas. We get a lot of those in these competitions. I've read some good ones. It's harder, I think, because there's a set point you have to end up at, and so it sometimes limits what you can do with the story. But not always. The highest rated, I think, novella from round 1 for my team was a prequel novella. It was Eagle's Fall. So it can be done very well. It's not inherently a bad thing, but it does have a little bit of a limitation. So we'll see if they can pull it off. It's also very interesting that this is another sort of performer historical fiction. We had one of those move on from round 1 on our team into the semifinals. It was the Shadow Dancers of Brixton Hill. That one was pretty good. That was a last-minute addition. It was one of the last ones I read, and I ended up giving it a high enough score to move on because it had a nice aesthetic to it, and pretty nice prose and all that. Another kind of oddball one. You know, you don't see a whole lot of historical fantasy in like the circus performer era of like late 1800s to early 1900s. It's funny that there's two of them in the semifinals. This one's got a lot more ratings, 51 ratings, 31 reviews. It's rated a little lower than the other one. This one's at 3.92 on Goodreads. But that could just be because it's more of a niche pick. You know, this type of book isn't for everybody. I admit I probably wouldn't read this type of book on my own. I'm reading it because it's part of the competition. But I like Shadow Dancers of Brixton Hill. So if this one's good, you know, I'll give it props. No reason not to like it if it's a good story. But next one. Oxy Come Home. Oxy, comma in the title. I love that. Oxy, comma, Come Home. By Phil Williams. She came to make a difference. If only they'd let her. Sniper Oxy hasn't found her place in the army yet. She knows she's good, maybe even the best. But command won't even give her a gun. In fact, they mostly want to blame her for everything that goes wrong. After the latest disaster behind enemy lines, she's being reassigned to the harrowing trenches, under the threat of ogres, mages, and tentacles. How can she convince them to let her fight? How can she prove she belongs here, and not in the miserable home she left behind? Return to the thrilling, chilling world of the One War with this prequel novella, set before Oxy joined the Blood Scouts. Available exclusively to readers of However Many Must Die. Not sure what that last part reads, but another prequel, interestingly enough. We got a couple of prequels here. It's funny, I haven't read really any of these series, so I guess that's a good thing. I don't have any bias in favor or against. It's just going to take the novella as it is. About a sniper. Snipers are cool. I'm not sure what it means. They send her to the harrowing trenches, but she's not allowed to fight. I wonder what the nature of that is. Is she an engineer? Are they just keeping her in the barracks? What's going on there? I guess we'll find out. But interesting concept, and it's at a 4.8 with 10 ratings and 7 reviews. So less reviews, less ratings, but it's a higher number. So who knows? Next one. Once We Flew by Nikki Lee. 4 generations ago, a generation ship crashed into the sands of Savine. Since then, its survivors have eked out an existence in the planet's hostile desert. Yet, the tech is failing, the sands are encroaching, and people are dying. Rescue is still generations away, if it comes at all. But Marsa is a survivor, and an outcast. Infected with the chrysalis, a disease that grants its carriers uncanny abilities, she keeps her distance from her dwindling community, until an old friend's dying wish sends her and a young boy across Savine's inhospitable sands in search of something Marsa had thought she'd long forgotten. Hope. Okay, so this one's kind of a mix of everything. This is fantasy, science fiction, mystery. We got generation ships involved, other planets, mystical disease, a lot of elements here. It's at a 4.26 with 46 ratings and 24 reviews. I like when stuff gets mixed up like that. I guess you would call it soft sci-fi, when fantasy and sci-fi gets all tangled up. Some people call it sci-fantasy as well, I guess, but that's pretty all-encompassing. That's what Star Wars is. That's what Marvel is. It's a pretty broad stroke, but I like that. I'm not as big into the hard sci-fi. I can read a good hard sci-fi book and like it. And I'll go out of my way to read them now and then. But I like the soft sci-fi stuff. I'm more interested in characters. That's what I love. I love to see character work within the world and the rules that you've established. And world building plays into character work. So as long as everything's believable, as long as stuff happens according to the rules that you've laid out for me, I can really appreciate it. I don't need stuff to make sense in the real world. That's not a requirement of mine, unless it takes place in the real world. Then it should probably make sense in the real world. But if it's fantasy, sci-fi, whatever, You just make it believable from the perspective you've put me in. Appealing to have all those elements. Excited to see how it all comes together. Last one is The Brightest Star, a Queen of Thieves novella by Andy Peliquin. The blurb here on Goodreads is The Brightest Star is a prequel novella to the Queen of Thieves series. ... So not really a blurb there, interestingly enough. Just telling me it's a prequel to Queen of Thieves. Another prequel. Once again, never read Queen of Thieves. This is at 4.44 with 9 ratings and 3 reviews. So, hasn't been read a bunch, but those who read it seem to like it. And sometimes those are the best stories. You know, you're one of the first few people to get your hands on it. Of course, having fewer reviews doesn't mean it had fewer readers. We all know how hard it is to get reviews. But, you know, wouldn't hold that against it at all. The cover's kind of cool. It's got like a little guy there holding the hammer. Not sure what else to say. Prequel novella. Gonna see if it works out. Gonna see if it's doable without knowledge of the series. But you know what? The best prequel novellas make the reader want to read the full series. A good example of this for me was Distant Thunder by Bowen Greenwood. Bowen, he writes the Exile War series, and I had never read it. But in the first round here, I read Distant Thunder, and it kind of set up the circumstances for his main character and how they ended up where they were. A prodigy, fallen from grace, stuck doing menial work as essentially a police officer in this sci-fi fantasy world in the slums instead of reaching his full potential. And the novella really hammered in his fall from grace. So I think it was a great pitch for the full series. And the best novellas can do that. So maybe if I really like some of these, I'll check out the full series as well. Those are the 5 options. 5 contenders, I should say. I'm going to do my best to read all 5 of them. I'm not sure when the deadline is for the semifinals. I assume it's coming up a lot quicker than the other one did, just because there's so many fewer books to read. But definitely going to check those out, me and Josh, both of us. And we should have those reviews coming up in the next few weeks, one by one. I'm not sure what order it's going to be in, but they'll be coming, so keep your eye out. Watch our channel, watch our website, and watch our Twitter. And be sure not to miss anything. But that's all I got for you. I'm going to eat the hell out of my sandwich now because I'm hungry, and I've just been picking as I've been talking. So thank you guys for tuning in. If you're interested, be sure to pick up my books, 3 Rivers Plague, Foot in the Grave, and Slipspace, Terra Nullius. And if you're looking for a novella, shorter read, then Longa There Run, which is my prequel novella, which is our newest release, just came out this past few months. Be sure to eat, be sure to exercise, and take care of yourselves out there. Have a good night.